What is your background?
What is my background? Crikey. Most interesting background in terms of food, I guess, is that my brother developed type 1 diabetes when he was 15 and I was 13. And that acutely made me aware of things like insulin, carbohydrate, sugar from a very young age. Then went to Cambridge University, and at about that time, we started getting some low-fat diet guidelines. Let's say that was probably around the 1990s. Low-fat new dietary guidelines started coming over from the US, and so suddenly you'd go home and realize your mum had put margarine in the fridge instead of butter. So sort of lived through some weird changes. Had a proper job, as my mum would say. I graduated from Cambridge, did management consultancy, went to work for Mars Confectionery, left Mars and went to work for GlaxoSmithKline. So went from big food to big pharma. So I've seen both of them from the inside. Then met a Welsh guy, moved to Wales, got some jobs in Wales, which were very interesting and outside food and pharma. And then since about 2010, I've been following my passion, which is diet and health. So I've since done a PhD in public health nutrition, particularly in the dietary guidelines that I was observing. And what I do now, I guess I read, write, and talk about diet and health.
Why are we talking about diet in the year 2025?
Because everything we're told about diet is wrong. Just everything. I mean, I just cannot think of a public health message on diet, or in fact, a public health message generally that is right. And that's how we connected, because we connected through the COVID world. And those of us who are already in the real food world, the nutrition world, that being told to eat carbohydrates and avoid fat and red meat is going to kill you, but cereal is somehow great. Just everything was upside down. So COVID came along and it was kind of, they're wrong on everything. They're not going to be right on this one. So it has actually helped some of us in the real food world. But essentially everything from sun cream to sunbathing, alcohol, coffee, diet, exercise is just all wrong. And I started looking into how wrong it was, and I do that every week, as you say, with my Monday note.
I remember meeting Tim Noakes, who you know, back in around 2012. We were sitting on a train opposite each other, just coincidentally, and we started chatting, and I spoke to him about some issues that I've got with heartburn and acid reflux and so on. And the first thing he asked me is, what do you eat for breakfast? And I said, well, I eat oats. And he said, well, stop that right now. Stop the oats altogether. Change it to bacon and eggs. And therein began a whole new lifestyle for me. But over the years, I've constantly heard it's a fad. Low carb, high fat, it's a fad.
Tim went through the same journey, which is what is so interesting. So most of the people that I speak with at conferences around the world, and I've spoken at conferences in South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Israel, America, Scotland, Norway, I mean, literally just all over the place. And I'd say the vast majority of people who speak at those conferences, who've written some of the seminal publications, academic publications or books, did believe the narrative to start with. And Tim is one of those people. So Tim was researching in sports medicine, and he was trying to show that Gatorade was actually better for sports performance than water. And of course, there's no way that it is. And at some point, you suddenly realize that you've been duped by the propaganda, and you need to sort of get back on track and realize what's going on. And then, of course, people say, oh, you're the crazy ones. And we're not the crazy ones, because if you look back over history, so if you look back to, 350,000 years ago, when Australopithecus lucy first walked upright, and that is believed to be our heritage in terms of being a Homo sapien, what we've been eating throughout all of that time is basically animals. That's when we really moved from being Neanderthals to literally rocket scientists. So the biggest progression was during the Ice Age, which I think was about 10,000 years ago. It ended. I think it lasted about 30,000 years, if I'm remembering those numbers correctly. And that was the time we could not get vegetation. We didn't have any plants. We were literally catching animals. Whatever we could catch, we would eat, and that would sustain us. So that is our heritage diet. And if you look back to what your grandmother would have eaten, I look back to what my grandfather prepared for me, and it was eggs for breakfast, and it was liver and onions once a week, and it was sardines, it was fish on Fridays, because that was literally when the boat came in. We had all of these meals. We had the Sunday roast. The carbohydrate intake in our diet was absolutely minimal. And then suddenly we developed to having a lot more carbohydrate. The agricultural revolution almost certainly changed that around the 1700s leading into the 1800s. Up until that point, our population, our lifestyle was constrained by what we could tend that was local to us. So we could argue that the agricultural revolution freed us up to become poets and artists and musicians and rocket scientists. We could also argue that that was the time that the world population changed, and that was the time that we moved away from what made us healthy and happy, which was working on the land and preparing our own sustainability.
So what should we be eating?
What should we eat? Real food. We shouldn't need to call it real food. They should have to call theirs fake food, and then we could reclaim the word real food. So first principle, number one, eat real food. Second principle, there are certain things that we need to get. The reason we eat is not just because it's enjoyable and it's sociable, but because we die if we don't get certain things. And if they're not fatal to us, then they can be very, very harmful to us. So we have things that we call big nutrients, macronutrients, and things that we call small nutrients, micronutrients. And we know the big nutrients as carbohydrate, fat, and protein. We know the small nutrients as vitamins and minerals. Now, some of those we need, some of those, the term in nutrition is essential. It means what the word essential normally means, but it means something that we must get from our diet. The body can't make it. So in terms of the big nutrients, two of those have essential components to them, and those are fat and protein. There is no essential carbohydrate. We have no requirement for carbohydrate in our diet whatsoever. The body will actually make any glucose that we need. We could always come back to that. But there are essential proteins, amino acids, there are essential fats. We know those as omega-3 and omega-6. So there are certain things that we need to consume. And the vitamins and minerals, if you don't consume vitamin A, for example, you get eye disease. If you don't consume vitamin D, you can get all sorts of stuff from any illness up to the serious ones like heart disease and cancer. If you don't get iron, you get anemia. If you don't get B12, you can go completely loopy. There are things that we just must consume, and people just seem to have forgotten that that is why we eat. And they just think, oh, if I eat a variety of things, I'll get what I need. Well, no, you won't. You need to eat some very specific things to get what you need. And predominantly, and I hate to say this because I was a vegetarian for a very long period of time, we need to eat animal foods. The stuff that we need and in the form that we need it is found in animal foods. So if we eat meat, fish, eggs and dairy, we'll be fine. If you want to add some other things on top, like red wine, dark chocolate and coffee, if you like super Greek salads and that kind of thing, that's great. But you've got to make sure that you get the basics.
So at this point of the conversation, we've now lost all the vegans.
Well, I understand vegans because I was vegetarian for 20 years and I became vegan during that period. Some people move from vegetarianism to veganism quite consciously. It's a very deliberate decision. They get to the point where they think, oh, I'm not even sure about cow milking. It doesn't sort of feel right to me. With me, it was more of a bit of a lapse. I don't love cooking. I love eating. So I've tended to have partners that are good cooks. So my hubby, who you know, Andy, is a great cook. And he just puts stuff in front of me several times a day or 3 times a day, and it's just fabulous. I was dating someone in my 20s who was vegan, and I hadn't quite realised it. So I was coming home in the evening and I was getting veggie burgers, which were actually vegan burgers, and buns, which are vegan, and brown rice, which is vegan. And I developed a really serious eye condition. And I turned up at Moorfields Eye Hospital, and what they should have said, and I've contacted people at the hospital since, to say you must ask people what they eat, particularly when they're coming in with a newly acquired condition, particularly when they're young, particularly when they're female, particularly when they might be vegan or vegetarian. Just ask them, because if somebody had said to me, what are you eating at the moment? Are you eating any oily fish? Are you eating any liver? Are you having any eggs? Are you having any meat, any dairy? It'd have been like, no, I'm not actually. Now you mention it. And they would have realised that I'm not getting retinol, which is what you need for eye health. And some vegans will say, well, you can get carotene from plants, which provides vitamin A. You can, but the body wants retinol, and not everybody can convert from carotene to retinol. So it's complex. It's not just, I'm going to be vegan, it's better for the animals, which actually isn't, because there are a lot of animals killed in the production of cereals and so-called vegan food. That's also a myth that I was deluded by. But you think it's better for the animals and you don't want to eat any of them. And it's not better for you. It's not better for your health. One of the best books that's ever been written in this field is The Vegetarian Myth by Zoë Harcombe, and she went through the vegan period, and she has had the most chronic health since that period. So she's got spinal deformation. She was never able to have children. Chronic, long-term, lifelong health problems as a result of thinking it was the right thing to be vegetarian stroke vegan when she was much younger. So she kind of wrote the book saying, let me tell you the problems that you can have so that you don't have to experience those. But people are still doing it right now. I know vegans. I've got a close family member, very young, who's vegan. And I chatted to her last week and she said, hey, if my health suffers, so long as I don't go near anything that's once been an animal or involved an animal, then so be it. How long that can last, I don't know. She's already experiencing health troubles that are taking her to some of the most advanced hospitals in the UK, but that is a belief system.
The thing, though, about veganism is that I understand one of the arguments is that they don't like the idea of animals being killed, and that's a personal thing, and I get that, and you can't really argue that. I mean, I go hunting, and I don't enjoy shooting an animal, right? Which is why I try and do it as cleanly and as quick as possible, because I know what the result's going to be. There's going to be food, and it's fairly healthy food, Zoe. So I get the I don't like killing animals angle, but the reality is that if you make the argument that eating meat is unhealthy, that's not a good argument.
Yeah, I've looked at this a great deal, and I've actually done a presentation on should we be vegan. And because I've been in that situation for a long period of my life, and I've given it a great deal of thought, and when you stop being vegetarian or vegan, you really have to wrestle with some of the arguments. So, and Zoë Harcombe presents these brilliantly as well. She came across the same three arguments. There are three arguments for going this route. One is the one that you've mentioned. They don't want animals to suffer or die for any food that they eat. Two is this belief that it's healthier. And three is this a fairly newfound belief that it's actually better for the planet. And all three of those arguments are wrong. The one on it's better for the animals, you can actually have one person live entirely off one cow for a whole year. So one animal could die for one person to be fed for the whole year. The idea that because you don't eat animals or anything that comes from animals like eggs or milk, no animal has died in the production of your food is an absolute myth. And it's one that you want to believe as a vegetarian or vegan because you don't want to think of the alternative. But the reality is, if you look at combine harvesters now, if you put a search engine in and look for images of farm equipment used at the moment, you've got combine harvesters that can sweep the size of the length of a tennis court, if not a football pitch. So they are ploughing down the fields at the moment, preparing the cereals as the alternative for eggs for people to eat for breakfast. They are hoovering up animals galore. There's a brilliant paper on field deaths in plant agriculture, and I think it estimated a few billion animals are killed each year. So, I mean, just think about the combine harvester. It's hoovering up mice and foals and birds and rabbits and snails and worms and Insects, if you're unlucky and living near a residential area, it can also hoover up a domestic pet. So you actually end up killing far fewer animals by choosing the animal that you eat more carefully than you do imagining that your cereal doesn't have remnants of animals in. And I'm sorry, but A, it might, and B, animals did die in the production of your food. Even for you to eat a lettuce, you've got to have killed some snails or some slugs to protect that lettuce so that you could actually eat it. The notion that it's healthier, which is touching on the point that you made, the vegetarian is healthier because the meat is less healthy. That is a complete and utter myth. That's probably the easiest myth to slay, because you just go back to why do we eat, what nutrients do we need, and where do we find those nutrients? And they are found in the form that we need them in animal foods. There is no debate over that. That is not an opinion. That is a nutritional fact. So they start making up all this stuff about animal foods because there is a strong plant-based agenda, because it's just much more lucrative to produce the plant foods. There's not much margin on a piece of meat or on an egg. There's a lot of margin in a cereal that can go in a box, and you can put toys in it and you can run advertising campaigns. There's much more margin in fake food than there is in real food. So there has been a big food, big pharma demonization of real food, and this whole, oh, red meat is bad for you, eggs are bad for you, that's all part of this narrative that is just nonsense. And then the one that has come about probably in the last 2 or 3 decades and increasingly is being used in the academic literature as, oh, this is why we mustn't eat red meat anymore, is that it's better for the planet that we're eating these cereals. And you'll see some great posts on X where somebody shows a field of grazing cattle, and then a factory pumping out pollution. And it's like, seriously, how dull do you have to be to believe that the cows and the sheep grazing in the fields are the problem for the environment and not the factory pumping out margarine and cereals and plastic toys and boxes and transporting this stuff all around the world, let alone the fact that certainly where I live and where you live, the animals in the fields are the local food. So what is indigenous to the UK? Cows and sheep. They are out in the fields where we graze. Potatoes, root vegetables, legumes, which is what they want us eating. They say, oh, we eat all of these whole grains and legumes. We don't grow legumes in the UK. They've got to be shipped over from Morocco or somewhere else in the world. We don't have berries apart from in sort of June, July kind of thing. So everything is upside down. And of course, the other key point about taking animals out of the food chain, which they would dearly love, there are people who say, oh, we need to create viruses or something that can put people off eating red meat. I mean, there's some really extreme narratives coming out at the moment trying to put people off red meat. If you take the red meat away from the land, so you stop the ruminants, those are the animals with the fantastic stomach systems that graze, so it's cows, sheep, goats, deer, take those off the land, you end up with desertification, because it's those ruminants that are hosting the microflora in the grasses and regurgitating it and eating it and pooing it out and weeing it. And just this incredible cycle goes on where they're giving back to the land, which then makes that field okay for us to be able to put some crops in the year after. If you go entirely arable in a field, you will lose the soil in that field within probably about 20 harvests. So we absolutely must maintain the red meat in our diets to be able to protect the rest of the food that we want to grow.
It occurred to me that if we were to all be vegans, right, and that includes not drinking cow's milk, I think, we'd have no cows, because what would be the purpose of cows? Who's going to keep a cow? Who's going to keep a chicken if they don't eat eggs or chickens? So they'll become extinct, most likely.
Yeah. And that's pretty serious, because if then a generation said, actually, we got this wrong, and the nutrients that we need to eat are found in animals, you've suddenly eradicated the ruminants who protect the topsoil and the ruminants who provide the meat and the milk and the dairy, you've eradicated those. And if you get rid of the chickens as well, which I'm sure they'd love to, I'm sure that's part of what all of this bird flu nonsense is about every now and again. Again, you see funny memes on X that say, how come, the sparrows that wake me up in the morning and the blackbirds or whatever, how come they're not being slaughtered, but the ones that need to be slaughtered are the ones that provide the eggs and the food or whatever. If we went vegan for a couple of generations and managed to lose all of those animals, they're extinct. They're gone. We don't then have the means of feeding the population in a healthy way.
But Zoe, we all know that eating meat increases cholesterol and cancer.
How? I mean, it makes no sense. It just makes no sense whatsoever. I think it was Surgeon General Peter Cleve or something who once said for an ancient food to be responsible for a modern disease is quite the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. So the idea that our most ancient food, meat, is somehow responsible for these modern diseases. We didn't have heart disease in the terminology for death classifications until just after the Second World War. I think it was around 1948. Cancer, I didn't hear of anyone. My parents weren't running around saying, oh, John's got cancer and Barbara's got cancer. I didn't hear the word cancer, even just in my childhood. And now it's 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 people who've got cancer. So you look back at cave paintings, they weren't eating cereals and seed oils and sugar and Twinkie bars and McDonald's and whatever. The cave paintings are of people carrying spears and chasing animals because that was the food that we consumed. So the ancient foods are not responsible for modern disease. Far more likely, it's the dangerous trilogy of the seed oils, the sugars, and the flours and starches that are, from a dietary perspective, responsible for modern illness. It's not just diet. There are many, many things in our modern lifestyles that are not helpful in terms of the new modern chronic diseases, diabetes, heart disease, cancer. There are many, many things that we're doing that are unhealthy, but you wanted to talk to me particularly today about diet, so that's the one that we're focusing on.
Yeah, but cholesterol is the big thing. I remember when I was a kid, you can't have more than 1 egg per week or something like that, and we got to keep our cholesterol down. And everybody that I knew was taking this thing called a statin.
Okay, where do we start on cholesterol? So the guy that first looked or most comprehensively looked at cholesterol was an American doctor called Dr. Ansel Keys. And he was also the person who did the Minnesota starvation experiment, which was a brilliant experiment. That was published around 1950. And then he started looking into heart disease in men, because it really was only men that were suffering heart disease when he started looking at this around the 1950s. And he first of all hypothesized, because of some research that he'd come across from some Russian pathologists around the turn of the last century, there was a hypothesis that cholesterol caused heart disease. And that remains actually a hypothesis. I mean, there are so many black swans to that hypothesis, it's not true. So he started saying, well, okay, what might raise cholesterol? And his first hypothesis was not unreasonably that cholesterol in food might raise your blood cholesterol level. And he investigated that throughout the 1950s. And there'll be a quote on my website from it's in my PhD thesis in the review of the literature. He made a really definitive statement in 1954 saying, we've looked at observational studies, we've looked at randomized controlled trials, we've looked at it every which way. We can categorically conclude that cholesterol in food does not impact cholesterol in the blood. Full stop. Now, there are still people who think if you eat 600 eggs a week, it will impact your cholesterol levels. And a guy called Dr. Nick Norwitz did exactly this recently and re-found the fact that had been established over 70 years ago that no, it's going to make no difference whatsoever. Now, here's a really interesting food fact, because I love food facts, things that you should get taught about in school, but you don't get taught in school. And then you come across them one day and then I'll look at it and say, is that actually a rule? Is that kind of a law? And there is an absolute rule here, which is really, really interesting. So dietary cholesterol is only found in animal foods. So there's no dietary cholesterol in things that vegans eat. You'll only get dietary cholesterol in animal foods. So to do all of those tests, where Ansel Keys literally gave subjects dietary cholesterol, which is basically giving them animal foods. He concluded that giving them those animal foods had no impact on blood cholesterol levels whatsoever. So he's also exonerated animal foods at the same time, because that's what he had to give people to test his cholesterol hypothesis. And people don't realise this. You know, again, it was the sort of finding during my PhD, and it's like, oh my goodness, that is a categorical dietary rule. He has exonerated animal foods in that research when it comes to cholesterol. So eating animal foods has no impact on your cholesterol levels whatsoever. And on another paper that I did for my PhD that was published, people think if you eat plant foods, it will lower your cholesterol. And there is a mechanism by which that can happen, but it's got nothing to do with animal foods. If you eat fewer animal foods and more plant foods, you will lower your cholesterol levels. But it was nothing to do with the animal foods. It was entirely to do with the plant foods, because plant foods, a number of them, many of them, contain something called plant sterols, which is kind of like the word cholesterol. It's kind of like plant cholesterol. When you consume plant sterols, and they're particularly high in things like seed oils, when you consume those, it competes with your human cholesterol in your body to an extent and replaces it to an extent. So you will end up lowering your cholesterol level. You could do it by taking a plant sterol tablet. You will end up lowering your cholesterol level a little bit, but it had nothing to do with animal foods. It had everything to do with the plant sterols. Now, obviously, the next important research question is that a good thing to do or a bad thing to do? And the paper that I did on that in 2014, published with my PhD supervisor, Professor Julian. Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. You just know him as Julian, don't you, for about 3 years? Well, I'll put that in the show notes anyway. But Julian and I basically published this paper saying, no, when you increase the plant sterols in the diet, it's actually harmful. It will harm your overall health outcomes in terms of heart disease and also in terms of cancer. So the end outcome is not good. So you do not want to be ingesting plant sterols or taking plant sterol tablets or taking plant sterols in seed oils, because ultimately it's going to do more harm than good. Hey, guess what? We're designed to eat animals.
Excuse me. I chatted to an Australian doctor maybe 2 years ago, and I've also forgotten his name.
Baker. I've just remembered Julian Baker.
Oh, Baker. No.
See if you remember your one now.
He was making a very interesting argument that most plants actually should not be eaten by humans. And he adds to that, saying that they are toxic. That's just precisely why they have a very bitter taste. That's a defense mechanism, not to be eaten. And I've never thought about that. And it was very interesting to me, because there are certain plants that seem to trigger bad reactions when I eat them. And I find that if I just eat bacon and eggs and basically almost like a carnivore diet or keto diet, I tend to feel better. Why is that?
Yeah, plants contain things like, well, the phytosterols that we've just talked about, phytates, oxalates. They contain a number of things, and I have come across that argument that it's their defense mechanism. They don't want to be eaten. I haven't looked into this to the extent that other people have. If it's such a big field in the world of diet and health, if someone else who I trust has done a good job in a particular area. So my go-tos on this are Dr. Georgia Ede, who is pretty much carnivore herself, and just found that her entire mental health and that of many of her patients has dramatically improved by avoiding a lot of plants. Obviously, the carnivore in Australia, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, has also looked at this. Yeah, Anthony Chaffee, yeah.
Yes,
has looked at this as well. So where I've ended up on this, yes, I think it's a thing. We definitely know that there are substances in plants where they put up a defense mechanism and they don't want to be eaten. I think a lot of people can consume a lot of plants with no problem. And some people can only consume some plants with no problem. And you've got at extremes some people who seem to get away with eating any plants, and at George's and Anthony's extreme, some people who just feel so much better when they're not eating any plants. So it's on a spectrum. And I think your experience is interesting. And I think a lot of people realize that there are certain plants that don't agree with them. And they either just then naturally avoid them, or they go through a sort of food diary exclusion exercise to try to identify, if somebody's got bloating or irritable bowel syndrome or brain fog. And if they came to me, for example, and said, what should I do? I would say, keep a food diary. Within 2 weeks, you will identify the things causing you a problem. So write down every single thing that you eat, at exactly the time that you eat it. Write down your column of symptoms. And there are some things that happen quite quickly. So you might have wheat and you might bloat very quickly, or it might be a sort of 24-hour thing. So watch out for both the immediate and the quite short-term kind of pattern. My husband, for example, if he has wheat, he might get away with it. More likely than not, he's on the toilet the next morning and his body is just getting rid of all the stuff that he ate that he probably would have been best advised not to. FODMAPs is a whole area of research, again, that I've not looked into, but I am aware of, where they document particular plants, particular vegetables that are more likely to cause problems. So somebody says, look, I've got some issues, a doctor, an enlightened doctor might say to them, look, start with the FODMAP list, eliminate those, see how you feel. If you improve dramatically, you know it was something on that list, and then start adding in those foods back one at a time. And then if you add cauliflower back in, cauliflower is such a strong FODMAP food. If you add that back in and you find you get your bloating and tummy pain and constipation or diarrhea, then you know it was that. So just take that one out. But it's always the plants. In all the times that I've been running a forum where it's trying to help people eat real food and people raise issues, I can never recall anyone who's come to me saying, oh, I have a problem with meat or fish or eggs. The one animal food that they might have a problem with is dairy. And we do know quite a bit about dairy intolerance. It's quite ethnically based. So if someone in one of the forums that I'm in says, oh, I think I've got a problem with dairy, and I can see on their profile picture, they look like a Northern European white person, I'm going to think, your chance of having dairy intolerance is actually quite low. It's probably around 5%. If the person is of Asian origin, it's the opposite. It's really high. It's like 95%. So if I see an Asian doctor, for example, saying, oh, I think dairy might be a problem, I would go back and say, I think it might, because here's the research, the academic literature, where I can show you that it's supportive of the fact that you're far more likely to have a problem with dairy than I am. And my view on food is, if you're okay with things, as long as you get in the basics, the animal foods, if you're okay with other things and you like them and you're the right way and it's not causing you any problems, then have them in your diet. I'm not a, oh, you must be a carnivore, otherwise, you're not a perfect eater. If you like curry, vegetable curry or whatever, or vegetarian chili, or brown rice or whatever, and it's not causing you a problem, then have it. But watch out for the foods that are causing you problems, because they will come from the plant world.
Speaking of foods that don't want to be consumed, I find, I don't know if you have the same experience, but I find that if I open a bottle of wine, it doesn't want to be consumed, because the more of it I have, the more I feel I'm intoxicated. So it's clearly trying to poison me.
Yeah, alcohol is different. Alcohol has other things going on. Alcohol is a toxin to the body. The body doesn't, it will process it as quickly as it can. It will process it in preference to other things. People say, oh, I need to watch the calories in alcohol. It's like, well, no, because your body can't store alcohol. Your body doesn't just doesn't store it. There's no other way of saying that. It's not like if you eat a McDonald's, the body is going to find find a way of using it or storing it. The body can't do that with alcohol. It can't sort of, store alcohol calories. It will preferentially burn them because it needs to get rid of the alcohol. That's why your liver gets really busy and stops doing other things that might keep your blood glucose levels normal and all the rest of it. But of course, alcohol, ethanol or whatever, it has other impacts on the body that are going to make you feel increasingly intoxicated, less able to drive, less able to have rational debate and make good decisions and all the rest of it. So, yeah.
But the problem, Zoe, is you sort of also want to choose your battles. There are some things in life that you're okay with having that as a vice. Otherwise, you're going to live the world's most boring life, and nobody's going to invite you over, and you're just going to sit at home sucking your thumb, trying to be healthy. I do enjoy a glass of wine, and I do enjoy a whiskey or whatever, and I know that it's toxic, but it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, I'm all right with that one, but I'll make up for it in other things.
I think that's really healthy, and I think it is about balance. So I look at the carnivores, and I've been to carnivore conferences recently. So I was at one last October where Anthony Chaffee was there, a guy from Wales, Keto Rich, was there, a brilliant psychiatrist from Edinburgh was there, and at the speaker dinner the night before, Andy and I were the exceptions. In the, they bought some lovely buttered broccoli and sort of green vegetables, some lovely sort of salads with healthy non-seed oil, Caesar dressing on and all the rest of it. And we were the only ones consuming any plants, and a lot was left on the table. So we kind of felt a bit left out. But I don't want to eat in that way, persuasive as they are. And they do say they just feel amazing. They regret the years where they actually consume plants because they feel so great at the moment. They could have felt even better during those years. I don't want to go that route because I love dinner parties. I love flexibility. I love, as you said, choosing your vices. If I'm in France or something, I'm going to have a croissant because their croissants are just amazing. If I'm in Italy, I'm going to have some ice cream because their ice cream is just amazing. I eat dark chocolate every day. I make chocolate mousse with dark chocolate. It's got a tablespoon of sugar in to stiffen the egg whites. I don't want to live like a monk. Most of what I do is really healthy, and I find how I live really non-stressful. So it's just become how I live. We're going out for dinner tonight. There's probably going to be a pavlova for pudding. There's going to be a chili. It will have whatever in. Andy will be drinking beer or wine. I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to go to anybody's house, and if they don't really know how I eat or they don't follow that themselves and they want to cook me a lasagna or something like that, I want to be able to enjoy it because that's such a nice thing that somebody has done for you. They've made a dish. They've gone to a great deal of trouble to home make a dish. I think if somebody's done that, unless you're going to die or something or seriously be harmed over the next few days, just eat it, enjoy it, celebrate it, enjoy the social occasion that you're a part of. I think people can get too obsessive over food, and that's not healthy either.
A lot of your work focuses on carbohydrates, but you've also spoken about all sorts of other things like processed foods, or whatever that means, or sugars, etc. And we'll come to fruit also in a moment. But there seems to be a lot more fat people today than when my parents were little. Why is this?
I think because we changed our dietary guidelines. That's my hypothesis. So the standard hypothesis, because the people who think there's only one way that you can get overweight, and that's to eat more and or do less than you need. I don't subscribe to that view at all. So that's a whole other podcast if we want to get into the calorie theory and why people have misinterpreted the laws of thermodynamics. They've misapplied them to the human body. Basically, what they're saying that the human body can be viewed as a cash machine. And if you put too much food in and or you don't get enough exercise out, the body just expands. And the body can adapt in about 1,000,000 ways, and the body does adapt. So if you eat less, the first thing that the body tries to do is try to get you to eat more, because it'll make you hungry. And if you do more, the body tries to get you to eat more. So the minute you start trying to go down this eat less, do more route, the body starts working against you rather than with you. So it isn't that. I have looked at that. I wrote an obesity book, which was published in 2009. I really looked very, very carefully at, is it that we've eaten too much and or done too little? And it just isn't. And Gary Taubes did the same thing in The Diet Delusion, which was also published as Good Calories, Bad Calories, and found exactly the same thing. It just isn't that. So you have to park that for another day. The one that coincides with when things take off. So if you look at, there's a great NHANES chart, a US chart, where it looks at obesity levels and overweight levels in the US, and that was the country that led the rest of the world in the dietary guidelines. And you see this chart and it just takes off like an airplane at about 1976 to 1980. So if you're a detective, you would say, what happened then? And one thing that happened then is that America changed its dietary guidelines. And that was the entire subject of my PhD. Why did we change the dietary guidelines, and did we do the right thing? And the conclusion of that PhD was no. We changed them in the name of heart disease. They didn't improve heart disease, and they've made a whole host of other things much worse. And the dietary guidelines that were introduced were what we've been talking about. So you should eat low fat, you should eat high carbohydrate, you should not eat red meat. You should have legumes and whole grains instead. You should be having cereals for breakfast, not eggs. You should be having pasta and pizza and beige things for all your meals. Base your meals on starchy foods was the message that came out in the UK. That was the UK way of interpreting the dietary guidelines. Now, since then, obesity has probably gone up about tenfold. Last time I looked in the UK, it went up tenfold in the last 3 decades of the last century. And until somebody puts in front of me a better hypothesis, that's the one that I'm sticking with. I think it's when we told people to eat less fat, less real food, more processed food, more carbohydrate. That's when we got fatter. And then, of course, people try to eat less and do more, and that just makes them hungrier. They lose a bit of weight. They start then regaining that weight. This is all going to happen with these GLP-1s as well. We know already that people who lose weight on those regain it, and even more rapidly than the rate at which they lost it. So we got this whole what it is to be overweight and what causes overweight. We just got it completely and utterly wrong. And we're paying a massive price for it.
The funny thing, though, and this is not really related to diet, but it's part of the culture wars, I guess, and the politicization of weight. Now fat is beautiful and it gets celebrated. Have you seen now you have ramp models who are completely obese, and it's almost as though they're trying to stigmatize being healthy.
I have seen it, and it has deeply troubled me, because this isn't about embracing everyone. I mean, yes, you want people to be included, and because I've been in forums for a very long period of time helping people to eat real food, I wrote a book called Stop Counting Calories and Start Losing Weight. So it's trying to say to people, don't count calories, make your calories count, make your calories much more nutritious than the ones that you're eating at the moment. But I am very, very aware of how awful people feel when they are obese. So absolutely don't be mean to people who are obese. I mean, that's just basic bad manners, like don't be mean to someone who's got red hair. Don't be mean to someone who looks different to you.
But I mean, nobody likes a ginger. Nobody likes a ginger.
behave. But it's like, don't be nasty. But no, we should not be celebrating. I don't think it's a disease. I don't want obesity classified as a disease, because then it's obligatory to treat it. So the drug industry want obesity classified as a disease because then they're compelled to treat it. And we're kind of there already, because they're already saying obesity is a disease. We've got all these GLP-1s that will sort it out. I don't think obesity is a disease. I think it's a natural reaction to an unnatural diet. And if we had carried on eating in the way that we grew up eating and evolved to eat, we would be okay. We wouldn't have an obesity epidemic, let alone an obesity problem. But I don't think we should be glorifying it. And I don't think we should be celebrating that it's become the norm, which it has. I mean, it used to be that people felt quite conspicuous at social gatherings. There was one overweight boy in my class. I talked to my peer group. They all remember one overweight child in their class. The situation now is that more than half the class is overweight. So people don't worry about being overweight. So it's much more okay to be overweight, but it's not okay. It's okay to be overweight, but it's not okay to be obese when it comes to our health, because almost certainly at the point we've got obesity, we've got insulin resistance, which is the precursor to type 2 diabetes, which will shorten our lives and comes with a whole host of other problems. So it's not okay, and we shouldn't celebrate it.
When you and I last chatted, Zoe, I had the most bizarre feedback I think that I've ever experienced, and that was after you were telling me about fruit.
So you've got to go there again, haven't you? Because you want the same reaction.
Yes, because I cannot understand how speaking about fruit can elicit such an emotional response. And I remember when I was growing up, I was told, fruit's very healthy for you. It doesn't matter what the fruit is. It's fruit. Fruit is fruit, and it's healthy for you. And it's good for you, and you must eat lots of it. But that is not true, is it?
It's not. And it was really bizarre. I remember when you got in touch with me. Okay, so in my experience, if I want to annoy people on X on a particular day, and I don't do that, that's not me. I don't go out there to annoy people. But if I happen to make a comment about one of two things, X will go ballistic. And it's fruit and fibre.
Yes, fibre. I want to ask you about that too.
And they're really related. And people will not accept that fruit is just not all that. Fruit is essentially water and sugar. And it's got a couple of vitamins or whatever, and minerals, really, well, potassium, just really not that many. And this is not an opinion. This is not something for people to sort of write in, oh, your viewer, had this opinion and it's all one. This is just nutritional facts. And if you don't believe me, then go to a nutrition database. There used to be a great one called nutritiondata.com. I think it's gone, but put in nutritional information for an apple, and then put in nutritional information for liver or oily fish or red meat, or eggs or whole dairy or something, and just do a little spreadsheet, look at the things that we need. So look for the essential fats in the form that we need them, omega-3 and omega-6, look at complete protein in the form that we need them, look at the vitamins and look at the minerals in the form that we need them, and do your little spreadsheet. I've done it. And put in all these foods across the top. You can compare them by 100 grams, and you should do it by raw weight, because when you start cooking things, things change. So do a raw carrot, not a cooked carrot, a piece of steak before you cook it, and then do it by 100 calories. So you can do it in two different ways, and you will not find fruit good at all. You just won't. It's got no complete protein. It's got no essential fats in the form that we need them. It's got no fat soluble vitamins in the form that we need them. It's just not all that for the B vitamins. It's just not all that. It's gorgeous. I love it. If I ever had a binge food, it would be fruit. Dates have more sugar than toffee. I could eat dates all day long. Dried medjool dates, I mean, I'm just salivating thinking about it. It tastes like toffee. They're chewy like toffee. It's just sugar, with really not as much else as you think that it's got in it. So, there are worse things that you could eat. Having an apple is better than having a bag of crisps, or better than having a chocolate bar or something, but it's just nowhere near as good as having something that actually is nutritious.
Yeah, so part of the feedback that I was getting was, well, if you just, I'm a vegan and I'm healthy and all that sort of thing. And so I responded to a couple of them saying, well, tell you what, why don't you eat only watermelon for 6 months and I eat only meat for 6 months? What do you think will be the result? Yeah. And I suspect that person will end up getting very sick.
Yeah. Plus, if you look at vegan profiles, and I have done, they tend to be very young. and they do tend to be female, and they do tend to be short-lived. So one of the biggest dramas you can have in the vegan world is where there's been an Instagram influencer where you've got a beautiful person, it's either male or female, and they just look amazing, absolutely role model beauty. And then a couple of years on, they'll put on their Instagram account, guys, I'm so sorry, I'm not vegan anymore. I needed to start eating fish and eggs or whatever. And there's just uproar. But most people will get to the point that they are having health problems of some kind within a couple of years. People who have been vegan for a long period of time and feel healthy, whether their markers are actually healthy or not, I don't know. But those who feel healthy are almost certainly supplementing well and are also almost certainly good converters of the plant form of nutrients into the animal form of nutrients. So things like an essential fat, the plant world provides ALA, and the animal world, particularly oily fish, provides EPA and DHA. The body wants EPA and DHA, but some people can convert from ALA. Now, you can't be a healthy vegan if you can't convert essential fats. So if you can't convert carotene into retinol, if you can't convert some of the other fat-soluble nutrients. So some people are more fortunate than others in that they will be able to continue with their vegan diet, or maybe less fortunate because maybe a health problem is the body's way of saying to the person, hey, this isn't actually how I was designed to fuel my body, so please can you go back to having some of those animal foods. And I'm going to give you an appointment at the Moorfields Eye Hospital just to remind you that that's how things need to play out.
But what about the different sugars? You get fructose and sucrose, and some people say, well, the sugar that's in fruit is better than the sugar that's on your table.
Okay, so carbohydrates 101, because carbohydrates are just sugars. So there are 3 what we call monosaccharides, which are single sugars, and they are glucose, fructose, and galactose. We then have what we call disaccharides, 2 sugars. Now, immediately you should be thinking, every time I'm hearing carbohydrates, I'm hearing the word saccharide, which means sugar. Yeah, think carbohydrate, think sugar. Carbohydrate is just sugar. So your disaccharides, one that you've just mentioned, would be sucrose, which is a disaccharide, which is 1 molecule of fructose and 1 molecule of glucose. So fruit, and again, you can look this up on a nutrition database. So look up different fruits because it's a very interesting exercise to do. And the ones that break down the sugars, they'll say, okay, in the apple, let's say it's got this much sucrose in it, and of the sucrose, this much is glucose and this much is fructose. So some fruits will have more glucose than fructose. They're mostly around 50-50 because it is sucrose that's in the fruit in the form of glucose and fructose. From memory, I think apples, bananas certainly have more glucose than fructose, and then there'll be some other fruits that have slightly more fructose than glucose, but they're basically playing around with those 2 single sugars. So glucose is going to go into the way the body metabolizes glucose is it puts it into the bloodstream. Now, the body wants, we're getting into diabetes interest here, the body wants about 4 grams of glucose in the bloodstream at any one time, which is why if you have your blood glucose reading, you'll come back with a reading of ideally around 4 to 5 mmol per litre in terms of your blood glucose levels. So you want 4 grams at any one time. Now, let's say you eat an apple and the apple has 20 grams of sugar. And that sugar, let's just say, for the sake of argument, it is 50-50 glucose and fructose. So about 10 grams of glucose are going into the bloodstream. The body had 4 grams of glucose in the bloodstream, and it was perfectly happy at that level. It has a couple of hormones, insulin and glucagon, that are going to keep it at that perfect level, provided you're not diabetic, and keep it at that level 24/7, 365 days a year, providing you don't muck it up. You've just put in 10 grams of glucose that the body didn't want. So the body's going to get that 10 grams of glucose out of the bloodstream. And it does it by calling upon the pancreas to get insulin to go into the bloodstream to attach itself to the glucose, take it out of the bloodstream, go and store it away in the body in the stored form of glucose, which is glycogen. If we use that up later in the day because we go for a walk or something, all well and good. If we don't use it up, it gets stored as fat, which is related to something we talked about earlier, why the more carbohydrate you eat, the more you'll put stuff into your storage system that can be turned to fat. You're far more able to use up fat and protein than you are carbohydrate. All right, meanwhile, the 10 grams of fructose goes to the liver, because that's where we process fructose in the body. So when people say to me, oh, which is better, glucose or fructose? I say, so which do you want, type 2 diabetes or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? And, you know, if I'm lucky, they'll laugh. If I'm not lucky, they'll look a bit annoyed. And it's like, well, I'm sorry to be the one that pointed out to you, the body didn't want 20 grams of glucose. Now, yeah, you're metabolically healthy, you're young, you're fit, and all the rest of it. Yeah, you can get away with an apple a day, no problem. But don't go and put in 400 grams of carbohydrate, which is what your dear government is telling you to consume on a daily basis. Don't have 5 apples a day. If you're following this fictitious 5 a day or whatever, or 7 a day or 10 a day, they make it all up in different countries. Don't start doing that kind of thing and thinking you're going to get away with it long term, because your body has to get rid of all the sugar that you put into the body because it doesn't want it in there.
Something Tim Noakes said a while back is that fruit today is also being so heavily modified that it's no longer like fruit 1,000 years ago. Fruit today is way sweeter, and that's on purpose. And it's not supposed to look beautiful either.
Yeah. So I'm really lucky. Where I live in Wales, we don't have a huge garden, but we have fruit. We have blackberries, we have wild raspberries, wild strawberries. We have the most amazing fig tree, which at the height of the season can produce 30 to 50 figs a day. We have different types of apples, cooking apples, a few different types of eating apples. We have 2 different types of pears. And I can tell you, they don't look pretty. They are completely irregular, and they taste really sharp when you bite into them. And I'm saying really sharp, like screw your face up sharp. And then I go to the supermarket, particularly in America, and you look at the apples in America, the Red Delicious, and they are so shiny and they look so beautiful. And I look at them and I just think, I want one of those. And I do want one of those. And I have one of those. And they are as sweet and as juicy and as delicious. They are Red Delicious. They are, as the name suggests, they are absolutely amazing. But I don't kid myself that they're healthy. And they have been engineered to be that regular and that red and that shiny and that beautiful. And goodness knows what pesticides and modifications have been involved in making that perfect apple look completely amazing when they're all stacked up. It makes me want to buy 10 of them, not just one of them. But yeah, they're not natural. That's not the plants that we've evolved to eat. It's not the carrots and not the root vegetables that I get from my garden. They're regular. Again, they're sweeter. They're juicier. They're tastier. They're not sort of the quite dense, almost woody sometimes, starchy carbohydrates that we get naturally from the ground.
What about coffee?
Well, I'm biased. I have to declare user bias here. I love coffee.
I also do, but coffee seems to be so mysterious. It seems to be this extremely popular beverage that has very polarized positions on it. Some sports you aren't allowed to take it because it's a stimulant, and I'm not sure what effect it has on your health.
It is a stimulant. There is absolutely no doubt about that. There are other things in our diet that are stimulants. Tea is a stimulant. Green tea is a stimulant. Dark chocolate is a stimulant. There are a number of substances in our diets that have caffeine and therefore are stimulants. I think we're back to sort of where we were on the plants, which is different people have different effects. So coffee came up at the conference last October, the Keto Conference, and Keto Rich was saying, I don't drink coffee. It's not good for me. Anthony Chaffee, don't drink coffee. Rachel, don't drink coffee. I was there. Ivor Cummins was there. And we're like, we're not giving up coffee. We don't care what study comes out. And I have looked at the academic literature for coffee. And there's as much evidence saying it's good for you as there is saying it's not great for you. I think it will be down to individuals. I think it'd be don't overdo it. If you're consuming too much coffee to the point that you're getting hyper and jittery and it's impacting your sleep, it's not good. Most people will say don't consume coffee after 11 because it's very likely to impact your sleep. I have one big latte with farm milk in the morning. It's kind of like a milk delivery mechanism. I absolutely love it. I don't want any more. It's not like I've become addicted to caffeine. It kickstarts my day. I'm not giving it up. Everyone to their own. If you enjoy it, don't abuse it, but carry on enjoying it.
I tend to indulge a little bit though with coffee. So I don't drink instant coffee. I have ground beans, and I add cream to it. I don't add milk. No sugar.
Perfect.
And it's fantastic.
Yeah. And we've got to have stuff in our lives that's enjoyable. You know, we can't be disciplining ourselves all the time. That is stressful, and stress is harmful. So you've got to find a lifestyle, you know, the good things that we should do in life. Eat well, move, don't be sedentary. It's far more important not to be sedentary than it is to run marathons. In fact, and Tim may have touched on this, running marathons probably really isn't that good for us. Don't abuse alcohol. The evidence on alcohol shows that people who don't drink are not the healthiest. It's the people who drink, enjoy it, drink sociably, and don't abuse it. They tend to be the healthiest. It's a bit of a,
sorry, I'm interrupting, but there's also a psychological element here. I don't know where I'm going with this, so this is just me spitballing. But when you said that those who do drink alcohol, a small amount, tend to be better off, and I'm just wondering if it's more than just biological. I wonder if it's the interaction with those around you that increases the happy hormones, etc.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you look at, you know, one of the biggest country drinkers in the world are the Mediterraneans. So you look at the French. My husband lived in France for 3 years. Having a glass of wine with dinner is like having a glass of water. It's just what you do. Same probably in Italy and Spain and Portugal and many of the other Mediterranean countries. It's sociable, it's relaxing. You know, if you say to somebody who's come back home after a hard day at work, okay, get yourself a glass of wine and just, you know, wind down, chill, put your feet up, get 15 minutes of me time, forget the stresses of the day. It's fantastically helpful. Enjoyable, de-stressing. It's a really important part of that person's day. If you then said to them, right, I want you to do dry January, and you're going to give up that aspect of your day, I think it's more harm than good. Now, don't let the one glass become 2 glasses, 3 glasses, 1 bottle before you've even had dinner. Then you're in problem territory. But if you are the kind of person that can manage your vices rather than have them manage you, there is a huge element to being sociable, enjoying a drink with people, not being, not living like a monk. You know, a monk is a recognized discipline for a reason, not always a great reason.
I'm looking at the time. I just want to ask you quickly one last question. If we're talking about a low carbohydrate diet being good for you, is there a starting point? Like, in other words, does it start from babies already?
Oh yeah, I mean, right, there are rules about what we need to eat. So what we need doesn't change throughout our lives. The quantities might change and the balance might change. You need more iron when you're pregnant. You may need more iron in menstruating women, and young girls particularly suddenly have a massive demand on their iron. You know, there's some things that change in terms of the amounts, but the basic, what do we need? The essential fats, complete protein, vitamins and minerals, that doesn't change. So with babies, for example, hey, incredibly, breast milk tends to provide everything. It does provide everything that the baby needs. And then at the point you need to supplement with something or want to supplement with something, you know, the longer you can breastfeed, obviously, the better. But if at some point babies now look, okay, I need more food, then it's the same principles. You're going to find what you need in animal foods. So get baby onto quality meat, fish, ideally oily fish, red meat, eggs, particularly the yolks, dairy, particularly whole dairy. This idea that, I mean, you know, the stuff that's in formula is just beyond horrific. The idea that babies should be getting onto those little processed bottles where they've sort of made it more plant-based. Because the dietary guidelines are the dietary guidelines, they just say that they're what everybody needs. So they'll be making sure that baby food mirrors those dietary guidelines in terms of being at least 55% carbohydrate, maximum of 30% fat, and maximum of 15% protein. They'll be mandating those in prisons, in schools, in baby food, in food for elders, in food for hospitals when people are trying to recover. It's just what they think we should be eating, and it's just the absolute opposite of what we should be eating.
You've covered a lot of ground in this conversation. So for my UK column audience, would you mind summarizing what we've spoken about here?
Everything the government tells you in public health is wrong. And if you can find any exceptions, please let me know. I mean, smoking. Maybe smoking is the exception, but you know what? You look at studies that say nicotine has some benefits, and then you think, is it something else that's in cigarettes that's maybe not good for us? Smoking might be the exception, but on everything else, particularly on diet and alcohol and coffee and sunbathing and sun cream and COVID and viruses and social distancing and masks and injections masquerading as gene therapy, or the other way around, on all of that, it's wrong. So your starting point should be, I don't trust it, and then go and do your own research.
An interesting thought experiment about smoking is you suggested there that there could be something else in the cigarettes that triggers illness. People have been smoking for thousands of years. And cancer seems to be a relatively new phenomenon. So I do think that you're onto something that perhaps it's something else that's now in the mass-produced cigarettes. But I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Yeah. And maybe the smoke that we're exposed to today, particularly if people are frying with vegetable oils, the smoke is going to be horrific, would be very different to the smoke that was inhaled around a campfire, where there's no treatment on the wood, on the tree. There's no pesticides around you. It is just fire that has been started in the open outdoors. Everything we used to do very, very differently throughout evolution. And the closer we can get back to that without being a bit monk-like, I think generally the better.
How can I follow your work, Zoë?
Just my name. I think I've just got Zoë on my name on the screen here. It's Zoë Harcombe, Harcombe. On X, I'm at Zoë Harcombe. I've got a website called zoeharcombe.com, which is where I do my Monday notes, which you receive because we've interacted before, so you get those. And I'm on notes 740, I think. I've been doing this since about sort of 2009. I take an academic paper. It might be red meat causes cancer, and I dissect it to show that it's wrong. And I haven't found one yet making a health claim that is robust. So they're all there for the taking.
And then just to be clear, you are funded very well by the meat industry.
I have no funding whatsoever. I refuse it. I have spoken at conferences for farmers, particularly in Wales, because I live in Wales. And I have been approached by farmers saying, please, can you come and talk to farmers? So I actually developed a presentation that was called Facts, this is hard to say, Facts About Food to Help Farmers Fight Back. And I will not be paid.
Wait. Say that. Wait. Say that again.
Don't make me say that again.
Facts about food that help farmers fight back. Wow, that alliteration is impressive.
I know. So it's facts about red meat, facts about cholesterol, the kind of stuff that we've been through. Because they've heard, oh, if you eat meat, it's going to raise your cholesterol. I'm like, how? So I will go and do a presentation, and then I'll take questions afterwards. And some of those presentations are openly viewable on my website. If you go on zoeharcombe.com, go to the types of content, click on videos, you'll see some of those. I will not accept payment from any of those. I won't even accept expenses. I go because I want to help them. Because without farmers, we have no food. We have no food chain, which is why I'm also very supportive of the No Farms, No Food campaigns that have been going on, particularly in the UK recently. And other concerns about farmers around Europe, because they're trying to replace farmland with solar panels. They're trying to replace farmers. They're trying to put farmers out of business. They're trying to stop the inheritance so they can't pass it on. And that's before we even get into the issues with farmers in South Africa. So I support farmers. I receive no company funding whatsoever, never have, never will. I have been approached by a cereal company. I just said, you clearly don't know who I am, go away. My income model is, if people like what I do, they can sign up. I think it's £1 a week or something, or $1 a week. And they get my newsletter, and they can cancel at any time. And that's it. That's where I get my money from.
Zoë Harcombe, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
Thank you for having me. It's been real fun. Thank you.